The slap echoed through the crowded dining room of Aurora, San Francisco's most exclusive rooftop restaurant, silencing the clink of champagne glasses and the murmur of elite chatter. Elias Navarro, a 24-year-old waiter with a quiet grace and eyes that held stories too heavy for his years, stood frozen, his cheeks stinging from the blow. The man who'd struck him, 26-year-old Tristan Caldwell, heir to a tech empire worth billions, smirked with the arrogance of someone untouchable, until Elias's lips curled into a faint, dangerous smile. It wasn't the pain that shook Elias. It was the memory that surged forward, a secret buried deep, one that could unravel the Caldwell dynasty in an instant. He'd seen Tristan before. Not here, not in this glittering world of wealth, but in a dimly lit alley 2 years ago, where desperation and a stolen USB drive had changed everything. Elias clutched the tray in his hands, his heart pounding, knowing the truth he held could destroy the man who'd just humiliated him. The restaurant buzzed back to life, but the air felt charged, like the calm before a storm. Elias adjusted his apron, his fingers trembling not from fear but from the weight of a choice. Should he speak? Should he wield the secret that could topple an empire? His gaze locked with Tristan's for a fleeting moment, and something flickered in the billionaire's son's eyes. Recognition, perhaps, or fear. Elias had come to San Francisco 3 years ago, fleeing a small town in New Mexico where being openly gay meant whispered slurs and closed doors. At 21, he'd packed a single bag, boarded a bus, and landed in the city with $47 and a stubborn dream of belonging. Aurora was his lifeline, a job he'd fought for despite the snobbery of its clientele. He was good at it, charming, attentive, invisible when needed. But tonight, invisibility wasn't an option. Tristan, on the other hand, was the city's golden boy, tall, with sharp cheekbones and green eyes that seemed to pierce through people. He carried the weight of his father's name like a crown. Victor Caldwell, founder of Caldwell Tech, was a legend, a man who'd built an empire on AI and cybersecurity. His influence stretching from Silicon Valley to Washington, D.C. Tristan's life was a parade of private jets, exclusive parties, and a carefully curated image, until tonight when his temper had cracked that facade. The incident had started over nothing. Tristan's date, a model named Serena, had complained about her wine, claiming it was off. Elias had politely offered a replacement, but Tristan, already 3 drinks deep, had sneered, "Do you even know what you're doing? Or are you just here for the tips?" The words stung, but Elias had swallowed his pride, until Serena, emboldened by Tristan's attitude, made a cruel jab about Elias's rainbow pin, a small badge of pride he wore on his apron. "What's that, your little pride flag? Keep it out of my face," she'd said, laughing. Tristan had laughed too, then leaned forward and slapped Elias, hard, as if to punctuate her words. The room had gasped, but no one intervened. Not the other waiters, not the manager, not even the patrons who'd known Elias for years. Power had a way of silencing people. Elias felt the weight of their stares, but he also felt something else, resolve. He wasn't just a waiter. He wasn't just the kid who'd run from a town that didn't want him. He was someone who knew things that could change everything. 2 years ago, Elias had been working a dead-end job at a dive bar in the Tenderloin. One night, a man, drunk, disheveled, and clearly out of place, had stumbled in, muttering about Caldwell secrets and a USB drive he'd stolen from a tech mogul's office. Elias, curious and broke, had listened. The man, a former Caldwell Tech engineer named Marcus, had spilled a story of corporate espionage, hidden deals, and a cover-up that could ruin the company. He'd handed Elias the USB drive, saying, "Keep it safe. They'll come for me." Days later, Marcus was found dead, ruled a suicide. Elias had hidden the drive, too scared to act, too small to challenge a giant like Caldwell Tech. Until now. As the restaurant's hum resumed, Elias slipped into the kitchen, his mind racing. The USB was still in his tiny Mission District apartment, tucked inside a hollowed-out book. It held evidence, emails, financial records, proof of illegal deals that could bring down Victor Caldwell and, by extension, Tristan. But using it would mean exposing himself, risking everything he'd built. He thought of his friends, his chosen family in the city's vibrant queer community, the people who'd taught him to stand tall. He thought of his own heart, scarred but hopeful, and the dreams he still chased. Tristan, meanwhile, was unraveling in his own way. He sat back at his table, ignoring Serena's chatter, his hands still tingling from the slap. He'd seen the look in Elias's eyes. Not just anger, but something deeper, something that made his stomach twist. He knew that face. 2 years ago, in that alley, he'd been the one to confront Marcus, to demand the USB back. He'd seen a waiter lingering nearby, unnoticed. Was it him? Did he know? The night dragged on, but the tension between them lingered. Elias served other tables, his smile professional but his mind elsewhere. Tristan watched him, his arrogance fading into unease. By the time the restaurant closed, Elias made a decision. He wouldn't stay silent, not anymore, but he needed to be smart. He needed a plan. As he left Aurora, the city's fog curling around him, Elias felt a spark of something new. Courage, maybe, or defiance. He didn't know where this path would lead, but he knew one thing. Tristan Caldwell had made a mistake, and Elias Navarro was no longer invisible. Elias's apartment was a cramped studio above a taqueria, the kind of place where the smell of cumin and cilantro seeped through the walls. He sat on his thrift store couch, the USB drive in his hand, its weight heavier than its size suggested. The city's hum filtered through the window, distant horns, the laughter of late-night revelers. But inside, Elias was alone with a choice that could change his life. He hadn't slept since the incident at Aurora. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Tristan's hand, felt the sting on his cheek, heard the laughter of a room too spineless to act. But worse was the memory of that alley, Marcus's trembling hands, and the words, "They'll come for me." Elias had been a nobody then, just a kid trying to survive. Now, he was still a nobody to men like Tristan, but he held a weapon they didn't expect. He plugged the USB into his ancient laptop, its fan whirring like a warning. The files loaded slowly, a digital archive of Caldwell Tech's sins. There were emails between Victor Caldwell and foreign investors, promising backdoor access to government contracts in exchange for untraceable payments. There were records of offshore accounts, hidden from regulators. And there was a memo, chilling in its clarity, outlining a plan to silence whistleblowers like Marcus. Elias's hands shook as he read, the pieces falling into place. This wasn't just about money, it was about power, corruption, and lives ruined to protect a name. Across town, in a penthouse overlooking the Bay Bridge, Tristan paced. The slap had been impulsive, a flare of anger fueled by Serena's taunts and too much bourbon. But the waiter's reaction, calm, almost knowing, had rattled him. He'd called his father's head of security, a man named Kessler, to dig into Elias Navarro. "Find out who he is," Tristan had demanded, his voice tight, "and make sure he's not a problem." Kessler's report came quickly. Elias was a nobody, a small-town runaway with no family, no connections, just a waiter scraping by. But something about the report felt too clean, too convenient. Tristan's gut told him there was more. He remembered the alley, the night he'd tracked Marcus down for his father. He'd been 24 then, desperate to prove himself to Victor, who saw him as a spoiled liability. The USB had never been recovered, and Marcus's death had closed that chapter, or so they'd thought. Tristan poured another drink, his reflection staring back from the penthouse's floor-to-ceiling windows. He wasn't like his father, he told himself. Victor was cold, calculating, a man who'd built an empire on secrets and fear. Tristan wanted to be different, free maybe, but the Caldwell name was a cage. And now this waiter, this nobody, was a threat he couldn't ignore. The next evening, Elias returned to Aurora, his rainbow pins still defiantly on his apron. The manager, a nervous man named Paul, pulled him aside. "Tristan Caldwell's coming back tonight," Paul said, avoiding Elias's eyes. "Don't make a scene. His family's too important." Elias nodded, but inside he was burning. He wasn't here to make a scene. He was here to survive. Tristan arrived alone this time, no Serena, no entourage. He sat at a corner table, his eyes tracking Elias across the room. When Elias approached to take his order, the air crackled with tension. "I'm sorry about last night," Tristan said, his voice low, almost sincere. "It was out of line." Elias raised an eyebrow, his tone cool. "Is that an apology or a strategy, Mr. Caldwell?" Tristan flinched, and Elias saw it, the crack in the armor. For a moment they weren't waiter and billionaire son. They were just two men caught in a game neither fully controlled. "I don't know what you think you know," Tristan said, leaning closer. "But you're playing with fire." Elias held his gaze, unflinching. "Maybe I am," he said. "But fire burns both ways." That night, Elias made a move. He contacted a friend, Jamie, a 25-year-old trans hacker who'd helped him navigate the city's underbelly when he first arrived. Jamie was brilliant, fearless, and owed Elias a favor. Over coffee in a Mission District cafe, Elias handed her a copy of the USB's files. "Can you verify this?" he asked. "And keep it safe?" Jamie's eyes widened as she scanned the data. "This is holy shit, Elias. This could take down half of Silicon Valley." She agreed to dig deeper, but warned him, "If you're going after the Caldwells, you need protection. They don't play nice." Elias knew the risks, but he also knew silence wasn't an option. He thought of his younger self, hiding who he was, swallowing slurs to survive. He thought of Marcus, dead because he dared to speak. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about justice, about proving he wasn't invisible. As he left the cafe, Elias felt eyes on him. A black SUV idled across the street, its windows tinted. He quickened his pace, his heart racing. The Caldwells were watching, and the game had just begun. The fog clung to San Francisco's streets like a secret, wrapping Elias in its chill as he hurried home. The black SUV had vanished, but the prickle on his neck hadn't. He knew he was being watched, and the USB drive, now safely with Jamie, felt like a ticking bomb. At Aurora, the tension was palpable. Tristan's visits became frequent, his demeanor shifting from arrogance to something unreadable. Curiosity, maybe, or guilt. Elias served him with the same cool professionalism, but their exchanges were laced with subtext. "You're good at this," Tristan said one night, gesturing to the restaurant. "Better than most of these people deserve." Elias didn't respond, but his pulse quickened. Was Tristan fishing? Or was this something else? Off shift, Elias met Jamie at a queer community center in the Castro, a safe haven where he'd found family. Jamie's laptop was open, her fingers flying across the keys. "The files are legit," she said, her voice low. "Encrypted, but I cracked them." There's enough here to put Victor Caldwell in prison for years, tax evasion, bribery, even links to a shady private security firm. But there's something else. She pulled up a photo, grainy but clear. Tristan, younger, in that alley with Marcus. He was there, Elias. He's not clean. Elias's stomach dropped. He'd suspected Tristan's involvement, but seeing proof was different. It made the slap personal, a strike not just at him but at the truth he carried. "What do I do?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Jamie leaned closer. "You've got options. Leak it anonymously to a journalist. Go public and risk everything. Or use it to negotiate. But you need to decide fast. They're already sniffing around." That night, Elias couldn't sleep. He thought of his parents, who'd disowned him at 17 when he came out. He thought of the friends who'd lifted him up, the community that had given him strength. He thought of Tristan, whose apology had felt real but fleeting. Could a man like that change? Did it matter? The next evening, Tristan lingered at Aurora after closing, catching Elias alone in the dining room. "We need to talk," he said, his voice urgent. Elias tensed, his hand slipping to his pocket, where he kept a small knife, a habit from his rougher days. "About what?" he asked, his tone steady. Tristan stepped closer, his green eyes searching. "I know you were in that alley. I saw you. What do you want? Money? A job? Name it." Elias laughed, bitter and sharp. "You think this is about money? You don't even know what you're part of." Tristan's face hardened, but there was something else. Fear, maybe, or regret. "I'm not my father," he said. "I didn't choose this." Elias wanted to believe him, wanted to see the man behind the name, but trust was a luxury he couldn't afford. The conversation was cut short when Paul, the manager, appeared, his eyes darting nervously. "Elias, you're needed in the kitchen." Elias nodded, but as he turned, he felt Tristan's hand brush his arm. A touch so brief it could have been accidental, but it wasn't. It was a plea, a question, a spark. Over the next week, the dance continued. Tristan's visits grew quieter, his gaze lingering on Elias with an intensity that wasn't just suspicion. Elias felt it too. A pull dangerous and unwanted, but undeniable. He hated himself for it. Tristan was the enemy, part of a machine that crushed people like him. Yet there was something in his eyes, a crack in the Caldwell armor, that made Elias wonder. Jamie called with an update. She'd found a journalist, Lena, a 30-year-old lesbian with a reputation for taking on corporate giants. Lena was interested but cautious. "This is big, Elias," she said over a secure call. "But you're in danger. The Caldwells have people everywhere." She agreed to meet, but only if Elias could guarantee the file's authenticity. As Elias prepared to hand over the USB's contents, he noticed the SUV again, closer this time, parked outside his apartment. He didn't sleep that night, his mind torn between fear and defiance. He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. He was fighting for Marcus, for every person the Caldwells had silenced. And maybe, just maybe, for the man Tristan could be, not the one he was. The cherry blossom tree in Golden Gate Park was in full bloom, its petals drifting like soft promises. Elias and Tristan stood beneath it, the city's chaos fading into a quiet hum. It was a meeting neither had planned, born from a late-night text from Tristan. "Meet me, please. I need to explain." Against his better judgment, Elias had come. "I was a kid," Tristan said, his voice raw. "My father told me to get the USB back, said Marcus was a traitor. I didn't know what was on it. I didn't know he'd die." Elias watched him, searching for lies, but found only a man unraveling. Tristan was 26, but in that moment, he looked younger, burdened by a legacy he hadn't chosen. "Why should I believe you?" Elias asked, his voice steady but his heart racing. The air between them was electric, charged with anger, fear, and something neither wanted to name. Tristan stepped closer, his breath catching. "Because I'm here, risking everything to tell you. I'm not him, Elias. I'm not my father." For a moment, Elias let himself imagine it. A world where Tristan was more than a Caldwell, where they could be more than enemies. Their hands brushed, a fleeting touch that sent warmth through the chill. But reality crashed in. "You slapped me," Elias said, stepping back. "You laughed. You're part of this." Tristan's face crumpled, but he didn't argue. "I know," he whispered, "and I hate myself for it." Elias wanted to walk away, to protect himself, but something held him there, the same pull that had brought them to this park, to this moment. The next day, Elias met Lena at a nondescript diner in Oakland. She was sharp, her eyes scanning the room for threats. "The files are explosive," she said, sliding a coffee mug aside. "But we need more. Proof of intent. Something tying Victor directly to Marcus's death. Can you get it?" Elias hesitated. Going deeper meant crossing a line he couldn't uncross. But he nodded. "I'll try." Back at Aurora, the dynamic had shifted. Tristan's visits were less about power and more about something unspoken. He'd leave tips too large, linger after hours, ask questions that felt personal. "Why San Francisco?" he asked one night, his voice soft. Elias, wiping down a table, answered without thinking. "Because it's the only place I could be me." Tristan's eyes held his, and for a moment, the restaurant disappeared. But danger was closing in. The SUV followed Elias home again, its presence bolder. Jamie called, frantic. "Someone tried to hack my system. They're onto us." Elias's heart sank. He'd underestimated the Caldwell's reach. He told Jamie to go dark, to hide the files. Then he made a reckless decision. He texted Tristan, "We need to talk. Now." They met at a pier near the Embarcadero, the bay's waves crashing below. Elias didn't waste time. "Your family's coming for me," he said, his voice low. "Call them off." Tristan's eyes widened. "I didn't. My father must have," he trailed off, realization dawning. "What do you have, Elias? What's on that drive?" Elias weighed his options. Trusting Tristan was a gamble, but silence was no longer safe. "Enough to destroy your father," he said. "And you, if you're not careful." Tristan's face paled, but he didn't back away. "Help me stop him," he said, his voice barely audible. "I'll get you what you need." It was a turning point, fragile and fraught. Elias didn't trust Tristan, not fully, but he saw a chance, a crack in the Caldwell machine. They parted with a plan. Tristan would access his father's private server, find the missing piece Lena needed. Elias would keep the USB hidden, a failsafe. As Elias walked away, the city's lights blurring in the fog, he felt the weight of his choice. He was falling for Tristan against every instinct, every warning. It was reckless, dangerous, but it was real. And in a world built on secrets, real was all he had. The plan was simple but perilous. Tristan would infiltrate his father's office at Caldwell Tech's headquarters, a glass fortress in Silicon Valley. Elias would wait, the USB his insurance, while Lena prepared to publish. But nothing about this was simple. Not the stakes, not the trust, not the feelings neither man could ignore. Tristan moved fast, driven by a mix of guilt and defiance. At 2 a.m., he slipped into the CEO's office, his father's domain. The server was locked, but Tristan had grown up in this world. He knew the codes, the back doors. He found what Lena needed. An email from Victor to Kessler, ordering Marcus's removal after the USB theft. It was cold, clinical, damning. Tristan copied it, his hands shaking, knowing this would sever him from his family forever. He met Elias at the same park under the cherry blossom tree. The air was heavy with spring, but the moment was heavier. "It's done," Tristan said, handing over a flash drive. "Everything Lena needs." Elias took it, their fingers lingering. "Why are you doing this?" he asked, searching Tristan's face. "Because you're right," Tristan said. "I'm not him, and I care about you." The words hung between them, raw and unguarded. Elias's breath caught. He wanted to push Tristan away, to protect himself, but instead he stepped closer. Their lips met, tentative at first, then fierce, a collision of fear and hope under the falling petals. The next day, Lena broke the story. The headlines screamed, Caldwell-Techa's dark secrets exposed. The evidence was undeniable. Victor's empire crumbled as regulators swarmed, investors fled, and Kessler was arrested. Tristan, cut off by his father, faced a new reality. Freedom, but at a cost. He had no money, no name, just himself. Elias faced his own reckoning. The world knew his name now, the waiter who'd brought down a titan. He was hailed as a hero, but he felt exposed, vulnerable. His apartment was no longer safe. He moved in with Jamie temporarily. The USB finally retired. But the victory wasn't clean. He'd lost his job at Aurora. Paul claimed he was too controversial, and he'd gained something he hadn't expected, Tristan. They met again weeks later in the same park. Tristan was different now, stripped of his arrogance, wearing a borrowed jacket. "I don't know who I am without them," he admitted, his voice soft. Elias smiled, his own scars lighter in the sunlight. "You're enough," he said, "and so am I." The world had changed, but not enough. Hate still lingered, in slurs and sidelong glances, but Elias and Tristan faced it together. They weren't just a waiter and a billionaire's son anymore. They were two men who'd chosen truth over silence, love over fear. The secret had ended the Caldwells, but it had begun something else. A future, fragile but theirs. As they stood under the cherry blossoms, hands entwined, Elias felt a quiet strength. He'd come to San Francisco to find himself. He'd found so much more.